Hello and welcome to the Green Seas podcast from TradeWinds. I'm your host, my name's Craig Eason, and I'm also the technology editor at TradeWinds. So one of my jobs is to look at the way that new technologies are being applied in the industry and look at how the business of the technologies is evolving. Now, a lot of the technology in shipping is closely linked, very closely linked in fact, to the regulations placed on the industry, notably the International Maritime Organization. The work at the IMO has in recent years, and particularly in recent weeks, shown that the decarbonisation of the industry is well on its way. The challenge for the industry, though, is which way. So, as your new regular host of the Green Seas podcast, one of the things I'll be exploring is how different solutions can and perhaps cannot help with that journey. And the best way to do that is to talk directly with the ship owners who have decided to tackle the challenge head on. These are the front runners, the first movers, those that will either be the first to capitalise on the commercial opportunities that are going to emerge, or will be able to put their hand on heart, hopefully, and say, nope, that is not for me because we tried it and it just didn't fit.
This week's episode is brought to you with the support of Bureau Veritas.
At Bureau Veritas, each and every one of us is by your side to help you navigate your decarbonisation journey and shape a better maritime world.
So for Green Sea subscribers, I recently interviewed Laurent Cadji, the Chief Executive of Union Maritime. Now this is a ship owner with a majority of tankers. It lists 53 on the water and almost 50 on order. And they are of various sizes, chemical tankers, MR tankers, LR2 tankers. And I wanted to talk to Laurent because first, this is a company with new buildings where the majority of them will have some form of new tech on board. In fact, 34 of those vessels will either have a Flettner rotor installed from Norse Power or a wing sail configuration from Bar Technologies. Now, you may ask me, why are they going for two technologies, two wind solutions? Well, that is also a question I asked Laurent in the context of what the company's strategy is to put so much of its own cash into new tech on its new buildings. The Union Maritime order book also includes LNG, methanol, gate rudders, routing software, new hull coatings, and for the larger vessels, novel superstructure designs. But yes, the biggest and certainly most visible aspect of the Union Maritime investment will be those various wing sails and rotors that are beginning to appear in the next 3 years. And in fact, the first vessel has now been delivered. It's the 18,656 deadweight chemical tanker Buran, and it's got a pair of Flettner rotors on board. And it's worth noting here that I also spoke to Laurent in June last year, when the company announced the first raft of investment in wind assist new buildings and also investing in a significant stake in Bar Technologies, one of the cleantech firms whose tech is going to be appearing on a number of the Union Maritime fleet. So I started by asking Laurent about his belief in wind technology, a solution which is certainly growing in reputation, and the numbers of new buildings and retrofits is certainly beginning to get impressive. But there also is, one could argue, plenty of reservations still about the technology because of its novelty.
I think generally in shipping, skepticism is fair. I understand it, that people generally, because the capital expenditure is not small, that any of this move that anyone has to make at time periods that are difficult to make big investment decisions, a lot of uncertainty in all respects, not only in terms of technology, in terms of trading dynamics, given global geopolitical issues. So I think that taking big decisions on capex is hard to do, and a hard thing to make that call and make the plunge. For us, we see it as part of our vision. It's very much part of the vision that we have of the decarbonization route, which really has only just begun. That there isn't a ultimate solution right now, but I think the industry is doing a clever thing of moving the needle in increments, and those incremental movements require investment to do one shift, and that one shift not only gets you part of the way, but it evolves the operating system of the business. So for us, a good example is, you install wind, but then you have to also buy wind tech for your operating team, so that the actual movements of the ships and the carbon emissions are starting to be measured more dynamically. So those are ballast routes, those are dry dock movements. So in all respects, by making that investment, we start then adding tech to our operating platform that changes and improves efficiency, because we start measuring efficiency with that much more rigor and focus. So I think that for us, the investment in wind is part of a larger transition play, where that evolution we think is going to be incremental and constant, and that we've only just begun it, but it's a fascinating one that we're excited to be part of, and it's one that we will continue to invest in. So wind isn't obvious right now, but there's, we've just migrated our operating system to something that can incorporate the wind. So we've also invested in the software side, invested in more technology for routing decision making and harmonizing the work that the ops team is doing with the technical team, with our fleet performance team, with our chartering team. So ensuring that the fabric of that operating system is tighter in the way it works, and improving the way that we run and operate the ships, that together with the wind and operating it optimally, we're going to reduce emissions.
Can I just get you to just recap then where you are in terms of the vessels that you've got planned to have wind as a sort of portion of your new, because you've got a very big new build order book at the moment across different vessel types and sizes. So could you give us a sort of overview of where you are, what's going on, what?
The chemical tankers that get, we're gonna try both Norse, and we're getting a smaller wind wing from Bar. So we're on the smaller, the Baran size ship, the 18.5s. They will have both technologies for us to be able to side by side them and see what provides a better result. Then if you go upsize to the, we got some handy bulkers, which will again have the mini wings, again to see how they respond to that. We then have on the MRs, the mini wings, or the smaller than the very big ones we discussed at the last meeting, and they will have Bars Tech are installed on those chemical tankers. These are marine line coated MRs, together with some MRs that we're putting gate rudders on, which again, the gate rudders technology existed before, but we think when we're able, or when we're in the process of measuring it very dynamically, very accurately, having identical assets, one with a gate rudder, one without, certain number with wind, without, it allows us, and of course, hull coatings, and there's a whole plethora of energy saving that we'll be measuring very dynamically, and we will be sharing those results with a lot of our clients and people we work with, and we want to see that the industry generally pushes to share more of that. I think that's going to be fascinating to see how big an impact is this all having. And then when we go up to the LR2s, we will have the wind wings. These are the larger ones. We have LNG, and we also have these on some of our later deliveries. We finalized on some of this redesigned superstructure, which that redesigned superstructure allows less wind resistance. So again, we're going to trial that on our later LR2 deliveries, which is exciting. So those ships will be LNG wind with the restyled superstructure to see all the impact of those changes. So as I say, no one at this stage can give very accurate feedback in terms of the value. I think the industry generally will struggle to argue that it doesn't make sense. The question is whether you want to make that investment, and then our job will be to exhibit how the result of that, how efficient that's proving to be, how big a saving that's proving to have. So the onus really now is upon us to deliver on that.
Do you think that's going to be a challenge? Because the industry is, like you say, there's always a certain amount of hesitancy in the industry, and you've got to work with your clients, with your charterers, within the scope of that to return the investments. And it's not an insubstantial investment that you're making here across all of these, not just the wind, but the energy efficiency engagements that you're doing, whether it's the software, hull structure, gate rudders, Bartek or Flettner rotors. There's all of these options that you're making, but this is largely an option that you're having to make up front before you start reaping the rewards. Okay, you've probably got agreements with the banks in terms of loans and that, but how have you managed to sort of get that into the long-term charters that you are signing? I know you signed a charter deal with Equinor recently, but I'm just thinking about how that engagement to get the return of that investment in the cleantech is actually forming part of the discussion with charterers.
It's a difficult one, and I think we've taken that decision to go it alone, because the difficulty is trying to have that conversation. I think charterers have taken an approach, and I respect it. The entry cost, both as an owner and as a charterer, are historically high. So you have to be a believer. You have to believe in the market, and then if you then firstly believe in the market, as in you're willing to take a position, you then have to take a larger position, as it were, to pay that premium for the performance enhancement. So I think that given, and I think geopolitical has been a big problem of the last 4 or 5 years, probably since COVID, all the way through to conflict, Suez, now Trump. I think it's just too much fast moving change. And I think that the market can't deal with so many variables simultaneously. So I think that we've had to make that call that with a cool mind, we think this is the right move, and we're taking that exposure, that risk. But yeah, it has been a very, very hard environment to get charterers to focus on 3-5 year deals. And I understand at sort of board level for large corporations, existing in a very complex macro environment, shipping still for most of these houses from a P&L perspective is small, and therefore it doesn't appear, it's not a decision on the scale of all the mega decisions they have to be making, and those decisions get reworked and changed in months, in a world that would have been in decades before. It's proven to be very difficult for them. So I think that we've not been able to conclude a deal that we agree with and that charterers are happy with. As you say, Equinor, we did a great deal with Equinor we're really excited about. Equinor are really excited, and they like wind a lot. These are marine line coated MRs, dual fuel, methanol with wind. So these were ships that they were keen. There was a process that we went through, and that was much more of a vision that Equinor wanted to see get done. But as on the fleet I've been discussing now, the market's just struggling to establish where the world is sitting, and therefore it's really a time that, as an owner, you've got to take that decision and be willing to make the investment yourself and go with it.
Now, my conversation with Laurent took place at the time when the Marine Environment Protection Committee was taking place at the IMO in London, and it was the day after the US made that position clear that it was against any IMO decarbonisation regulation and was making sort of retaliatory threats, both in light of the international decarbonisation strategy, which clearly Laurent Cadji is backing, but also against Chinese-linked ships or vessels built in China, which is where the majority of Union Maritime's new buildings are set to be built. So our conversation turns to the now agreed 2-tier compromise agreement, which included a cost for carbon and a method to raise revenues to help the industry decarbonise, and the funds that are going to be needed to ensure that it's equitable and just.
It strikes me that Europe believes in this strongly. It strikes me that China is backing it in the way that you would want them to, in terms of the noises they've made. And I think it's hard to see it, but it feels to me that the US is alienating itself fast. And this move, it's really disappointing. It would surprise me if Europe and China back away because of the US action versus actually doubling down and using this as a evidence of the unreasonableness of the US approach right now. To be fair, the IMO, I think, is doing such a great job. I think that the management is really well, being led really well. So it feels to me that the vision and view the IMO holds is actually authentic In other words, the IMO itself believes it. So I hope for the world, right, that the IMO keeps the momentum it started to build, which I think has gained a lot of respect from the shipping community. I think that the management has done a really great job over the last couple of years in building a credible, strong voice about and a united voice, which I think shipping has really needed that. So I hope that that sense and logic, which is the right one, and it's hard to argue anything that's not in favor of that. I hope that they continue to see the logic and rationale. And it's one that, again, this is going to be a transition, and if we don't invest over the next 20 years, we will pay the price. There's no two ways about it.
And I think that's the certainty that the shipping industry needs, isn't it? They need to know that there is a goal for 2050 that is now being set. Well, it's already set, but they know the road that they have to take. So they know you, as an example, as you've got 47 ships on order, but you need to have that certainty that what you're investing in is going to give you the return. And it's
I think you're right. Yeah. I mean, I think that the problem is people don't realize the decisions now that somebody makes really doesn't hit the. I mean, if you today have a negotiation with a shipyard, you're probably talking 29 slots plus or minus. So you're talking maybe 28, 29 to 3 to 4 years. So a decision today is for 4 years from now, but itself will then last 20 years. So, as an organization, you need planning processes that give rails that are clear the direction we're heading, because you're making a decision for 25 years from now. You're not, it's not buying or selling a stock or, gold in the morning and you sell it in the afternoon. These are proper, long dated, serious decisions that require, corporate planning and sensible thoughts. So I think that's something that I think the IMO has done a great job of bringing reason and rationale to the discussion over the last couple of years, and I'm confident they will keep pushing ahead with that.
Just on the last point on that about this sort of 4 years and then the lifespan of the ships, there's a lot of talk at the moment about the other side of the Trump administration's decision making, and that's putting a tariff on Chinese built or Chinese linked vessels. I'm going to guess that you would have the approach then, from what you've just said, that, well, that's only going to be 4 years because after that we'll be back to normal. Is that the sort of long-term approach you're thinking?
Look, it's disappointing. I mean, look, having been, our lifetime, my father's lifetime, kind of post-war, the world went one direction. The world got closer. Trade was something that created not just global growth, but cohesion within countries, and was just a great solver to historical issues. And that is being messed with now. That the impact of these tariffs is obviously putting at risk decades of effort in bringing the world closer. So that's something that I don't, I'm definitely concerned. I'm concerned in terms of what it means on a wider level, but I'm concerned obviously for our business, for generally world trade. So I think we take it seriously. It is a serious event. It will impact us. But at the end of the day, shipping is a dynamic asset class, and one that generally, certainly for the tanker market, is proven when events happen that are this substantial and seismic, there's usually more subtext to it in terms of how it plays out in the real world. And so I think that we're going to witness, it's going to be a complex ride. But I think that, as you say, I can't believe this scenario is the world for the next 20 years. I think that we will be in a very volatile, fast changing, and as an organization, you're going to have to be comfortable to deal with that and run with it. And it's not a time now to make rash decisions on the back of a rule that may get changed in a month, or it's actually the only thing you really can do now is take a view on the impact to where you are right now and what you're planning to do for the fleet on the back of this. But whatever rule is implemented today is is at risk of being changed in overnight. We've seen a softening of the US or vocabulary that suggests a softening of the US policy towards Chinese shipping infrastructure. It's not clear yet what that means, but there's been suggestions that given the scale of Chinese shipping and construction, it's going to be difficult for the US to follow through, possibly in the full limit. Maybe there's going to be delays to implementation, which will be a precursor to negotiations or something.
Well, that was Laurent Cadji, Chief Executive of UK-based tanker owner Union Maritime, talking to me about the need for reason and rationale in the decarbonisation strategy and the role Trump's policies will have on shipping. And before that, we were talking about how they're using their fleet of new buildings to be a testbed for cleantech. Well, that's it for this week. We'll be back in a week with another episode of the Green Seas podcast. Until then, goodbye.